Unai Emery was a failure at Arsenal and was fired after 18 months. But now he has created an energetic, quality-filled squad at Aston Villa while making their home ground such a fortress that the team were unbeaten there for 17 consecutive league matches and are now looking to upset the Big Six and secure a place in the Champions League. But what actually happened at Arsenal? Let's find out. Time before Arsenal. If there's anything Unai Emery's name is synonymous with, it's overachieving. After beginning his coaching career with the Spanish side Loca Deportiva, who he helped win promotion from the third league to the second, Emery then moved to the helm of Almeria, winning them promotion to La Liga for the first time in their history and helping them somehow finish 8th in 2007-08. He next moved to Valencia and took them to the Europa League and UEFA Champions League, despite the club's severe financial problems. After a poor stint at Spartak Moscow, Emery then went to Sevilla, leading the team to 3 consecutive European Cups before moving to his biggest job yet, PSG. He won a total of 7 trophies at PSG. Unfortunately, his PSG side famously bottled a 4-0 advantage to Barcelona to eventually lose 6-1 in the Champions League knockout phases. He would eventually decide to leave PSG after reports of him having issues with some players emerged. If only Emery had learned from the nightmare he faced in Spartak and truly learned to manage egos in his time at PSG, maybe his Arsenal stint could have been different. The early rise. When Emery got to Arsenal, he arrived during a transition period. The legendary Arsene Wenger, who had been at the club for 22 years, had just left. The void left behind was wide and the way the club was being run had changed. The coach would have less influence under this new setup. However, the club did have quality on the pitch and should have done better in the 18 months Emery was there for. Emery became the new Arsenal coach. It was a no-brainer, and the team would go on to have a flying start. After 2 losses early to Chelsea and Man City, Emery's Arsenal went on a 22-game unbeaten run, which created the impression that the squad did have enough quality. Fans were excited and began to believe again. What Emery was doing was working. He favoured lengthy video analysis, which the players weren't used to. He also tried to communicate with his players in English despite his difficulty with the language. Emery did have translators, which he didn't want to use. More importantly, the team was winning. And just as promised, he began to involve academy players as he promoted Saka to the first team and gave him his debut in the Europa League. With Arsenal's performance both in the league, which had them chasing the top 4, Arsenal fans dreamed of a Champions League campaign. Everything was going well until the fall. In the last 5 matches of the season, Arsenal became a shadow of itself. They simply ran out of steam, and their hot run of form turned to a cold crawl of doom. They lost 3-2 to Crystal Palace, drew with Brighton, and lost to Leicester 3-0. These losses cost them the highly coveted 4th position, but they still had hope. There was the 2019 Europa final at Baku. If they won that, they'd book themselves an important Champions League spot. But unfortunately it wasn't to be, and Chelsea thoroughly smashed them in that final 4-1. And things hardly got better the following season. The club splashed £72 million for Nicolas Pepe in the summer of 2019, but that initial positivity Emery brought to the team had disappeared. After 0 wins in 7 games, which was something Arsenal hadn't experienced since 1992. After 78 games in charge, Emery got the sack, despite having a win percentage of 55, which is the 3rd best of any Arsenal manager ever, and is better than Arteta's first 78 games. So, was he unfairly sacked? When Emery got to Arsenal, he arrived at a time when Arsenal was trying to take power from a solitary figure and spread it across a small group of people. Ivan Gazidis, the then chief executive, believed Arsenal were too reliant on arson and proceeded to chop up his powers and appoint 9 heads of departments. So the only power Emery had was the power over his squad, and even that was limited as he had little say over transfers. Even the transfer strategy was confusing because the leadership had different visions of what it should be. Some wanted a data-driven approach, others wanted to use players from agents they had long-term relationships with. Chief Executive Ivan Gazidis left in September 2018. Raul Senlehi, who joined as head of football relations in 2018, took over but then left in August 2020. That kind of internal confusion led to the signing of Pepe. Emery didn't want Pepe. His choice was Zaha, but the club preferred younger players. Unfortunately, Pepe didn't fit into the way Arsenal played and became a very expensive mistake. There continued to be changes in the Arsenal hierarchy, but things began to stabilise with the appointment of Arsenal's former midfielder Edu Gaspar as technical director in July 2019. Arsenal reverted to the old model and the Kroenke family became more involved. But around the time when things settled and Arsenal steadied themselves, another problem arose for Emery. The players' revolt. "Sometimes I don't understand when the coach is trying to communicate with me," Saka said when he talked about Emery's communication issues. It even got to a point where players reportedly mocked his accent. Unfortunately, it didn't stop at this. Signs that Emery would lose his dressing room had been there for a while. Apart from the problems of communications, Emery's thorough analysis sessions weren't popular amongst the Arsenal players, especially considering his poor English, which he insisted on speaking. This, alongside his unpopularity with some senior players in the club, slowly destroyed his authority. Players barely listened, and they showed it. Emery then began experimenting with the squad, using more players and making more half-time substitutions than other coaches, but still nothing worked. And after a winless run of 7 games, Arsenal promptly sacked him and hired Mikel Arteta, who would go on to win the FA Cup just months later. Revenge on Arsenal. He's the record UEFA Europa League winner with 4 trophies, 3 of which he won consecutively in Sevilla. At PSG, he won 7 trophies, which included a domestic quadruple. He then went to Villarreal, where he knocked Arsenal out of the Europa League on his way to winning it for the 4th time, becoming the coach with the most Europa League trophies in history. Afterwards, Emery went to Aston Villa, following the sacking of Steven Gerrard in October 2022. Emery lifted them from the bottom half of the table and has turned players like Douglas Luiz, Emiliano Martinez and Ollie Watkins into elite Premier League players. Villa are now looking to upset the Big Six by taking a Champions League spot from them. Compared to his performance at Villarreal with his Europa win and how he has rejuvenated Aston Villa, Emery's tenure at Arsenal was a failure. Still, with the squad he had at Arsenal, he may have overachieved anyway, as even after Arteta's FA Cup win, he pushed for the squad to be chopped down and rebuilt. Still, Arteta finished 8th in the league twice, but unlike Emery, he was given time. If Emery had won the Europa League, maybe he would have had the time to make a proper mark at Arsenal. So, was Emery a failure, or was he wrongly fired? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to see more of our football content.